Hi all, welcome to Diversified Finance. My name is Lakal, and today I'm going to go through these 9 reasons for Australian housing market downturn, and then I'm going to go through 2 videos, one from the business ABC iView video regards to the Australian housing market, and which is this one, and then I'm gonna go through this. I'm gonna play this video, and this dude has been talking about the Australian housing market from a long time, probably like probably 3 years ago or so, and it's been warning about the housing market. And if you want, you can subscribe to his channel, which is Economic Times. Yeah, he's been talking about the Australian housing market from a long time, so that's what I'm planning to do today. So let's start off with 9 reasons for Australian housing market downturn. And please mind that I've already went through these reasons probably a month in September or so, and now I've already done a video about it, but I just roughly went through like without explaining what it means. But today I'm thinking of like just going in details, like trying to explain it, like take about a minute or so to explain these 9 reasons, and then we can head on to these 2 videos. Okay, so reasons for Australian housing market downturn. First one is title lending. So this is obvious to everyone right now. It's back in the day, you walk up to a counter and fill in like a mortgage application form or go through a mortgage broker. You are guaranteed to get a mortgage or a loan approved. But right now, as you know, lending is really tighter, meaning banks, when you apply for a mortgage or like or home loan, banks gonna go through your transactions, and then it looks like they make sure that you are financially disciplined, before they lend any money. Because over the years, after the Royal Commission, that we found out that banks have been lending irresponsibly. So because of that, now that things are really because the Royal Commission, they are under pressure, all the banks are under pressure. So now, as a result of that, before they give you a loan, they go through a transaction and make sure that you would be able to keep on paying, there's these repayments in the coming future, like maybe say 10, 20, 30 years or so. So that is obvious. Credit is not easily available. That's reason number 1. Less borrowing capacity. So back in the day, we already discussed about this. I've seen like a chart, a lending criteria, where say in 2017, if you own a $80,000 salary per year, they considered as your expenses $32,000 a year, which is wrong. Average, if you're on average salary, your which is $80,000, your average expenses should be around $50,000 a year, right? So they, depending on this lending criteria, they back in the day, if you own $80,000, you would probably be able to borrow up to say 340,000 dollars back in the day. But right now it's been reduced to $200,000. So if you own $80,000, which is the average salary in Australia at the moment, back in the day you probably be able to get 340, but right now you probably could get $200,000, meaning it's been reduced by $140,000. So when we consider a combined salary, say a wife and husband, right, say they both own $80,000, which is like average salary, your borrowing capacity has been reduced from 680,000 to 400,000. Right, so this is which is a 40% less borrowing capacity compared to 2017 or before the Royal Commission. So this is right now, if you apply for a mortgage, you guaranteed to get 40% less compared to a few years ago. So that's reason number 3. And reason number 4 is rising interest rates. Okay, so globally and locally, say for example, okay, say RBA, they've said many times, okay, next rate change going to be an increase, right? But say for example, they not going to raise interest because they know if they increase interest rate, housing market, there'll be a crash in the housing market, right? Because even at record low interest rate, people are still struggling to pay their repayments. So if they increase interest rate, banks will definitely pass it through to their borrowers, and then the borrowers will be in hot water. So say for example, for the next year, RBA is not going to increase interest rate, but unfortunately in US, Federal Reserve in US, they already mentioned that that they're gonna have 3 to 4 rate hikes coming in 2019, and in September they have already increased interest rate by 25 basis points, and in December they mentioned there's like a 90% chance that there'll be another interest rate hike. So at the moment Federal Reserve cash rate in US is 2.25, but we are sitting on 1.5%. So there's highly unlikely interest rates are going to go up. So even if RBA is not going to increase the interest rate, global interest rates going to go up. So if that happens, given that 30% of the banks borrowing capacity comes from overseas, bank, regardless of what RBA does, bank will definitely increase the interest rates. So if they increase interest rates, given that people are already having a hard time right now paying off their mortgage, imagine what happens when it goes up by 1% or 2%, like in the next couple of years or so, right? So then this will definitely going to affect the housing market in Australia. And that's number 4, expiring term for interest only loans. Okay, so there are 360 billion home loans, interest only home loans that people borrowed in 2014 and 15, and they're going to expire starting from 2019 to 2021. So the maximum interest only period, I think it's around 5 years. So people who borrowed money in 2014, 15 and 16, 17, right now they have like an interest only loan, but because of the pressure from the Royal Commission, when that period expires, bank will definitely gonna ask people to start paying their principal as well. So recently I've read few articles, and I've seen when it switched from interest only to interest plus principal, there could be $400 extra added for your repayment. So if you're an investor, you would probably gonna struggle. Just because your mortgage repayment has gone up, right? If you're an investor, you cannot just pass it on as is to your renter, right? Because renter might say, okay, yeah, maybe you have to pay $400 extra per month, but it doesn't mean that my wage is going to go up by $400 a month. So if you're an investor, you can increase your rent as long as your renters are getting paid more. But we know that we're going to talk about it later in this video. Wages are stagnant, wages are not going up. So you probably be able to increase your payment by $25 a week, right? So you might probably get away $100 out of 400, but you still have to find $300 more to keep up with your repayments for that investor loan. So this gonna make a lot of investors gonna lose interest. They will okay, if the investor has to pay principal plus interest, that means the repayment is going to go higher. If that's the case, they would not be able to, like, get all their money out of the renter, because renter is not getting paid extra. So meaning, like, they will probably forced to sell. So that's number 4. And rise of cost of living. So look at the petrol price right now, right? Petrol price, because of rate hikes from US dollars keep on going up, and comparatively, like compared to the US dollar, Australian dollar has gone down. So because of that, we end up paying, like, little bit extra on petrol. And if interest rates going to keep on going up overseas, like, who knows, by the end of this year we might probably have to pay $2 per liter. So this is added extra costs, like, for an average household. And if you look at other expenses, right, like, because look at the council rate, like, they increase, like, to match the inflation, they keep on increasing their charges. So if that's the case, if your wages, if you're not getting paid extra, right, I mean, you have to cut down, like, you have to keep on cutting down to keep up with your repayments. But you can do it for a certain extent, right? You cannot do it forever. And stagnant wages, yeah, so we haven't seen or we're not gonna see any wages growth, like, in the future. So if wages growth gonna keep on going up, say 5 to 10% a year or so, yeah, then we might be able to keep up with our repayments. But unfortunately, if we get the same salary every month, but our repayments are getting bigger, cost of living is rising, at the same time interest only loans expiring, and then we ended up paying, like, extra to keep up with these investor loans. So that's gonna affect the housing market for sure. And less interest from foreign buyers, yeah. So as we know, back in the day, like, if you're trying to sell your house, like, if you're at auction, you'll see a lot of Chinese buyers. But given that we hear Australian market downturn on television right now on 9 News, like, how we hear, like, on radio we hear about Australian housing market downturn, we are seeing, like, less interest from foreign buyers. They're kind of, like, holding it back and then staying away from the housing market. They kind of, like, they want to wait and see, like, because it has gone down 10 to 20% already. They might think, okay, who knows, maybe it might go another 10%. So that means just by waiting, I might be able to save 10% on the house that I'm going to buy. So there'll be less interest from foreign buyers, and they probably sit back and wait and see what's happening. And yeah, see, given that we have all these reasons, like, it's hard to believe who is building these apartments, like, and for whom they are building these apartments for. Because even I live in Blacktown, I still see, like, there's few cranes, like, here and there, and, like, I don't know who could afford to buy these apartments. And the only thing it does is they're gonna make the supply, they'll increase the supply, and then we have tighter lending, less borrowing capacity, and at the same time they increase the supply. And we might see, like, a fire sale, but because everybody want to sell at the same time, but there are less buyers. So if after all these issues, like, the problems we have, the building hasn't stopped yet. So they're still building. I heard, like, I think they add 200,000 to 250,000 new apartments to the market. So I don't know who's going to buy all this, because people cannot afford to buy them anymore. And the last one would be investor profit taking. Yeah, so yeah, one thing investors will be forced to sell, that's for sure. Like, if their repayment's gonna go up by $400 a month, of course they will force to sell. But apart from that, someone who invested in this property market, say 5-10 years ago, right, he probably bought like, few properties at a cheaper price. So he already seeing, like, I mean, he we might think, okay, like, longer I hold this property, less I could sell it for. So if that's the case, how about, like, I lose 50,000 per property or 100,000 per property and sell it right now and take a profit out of it, and like wait and see and then buy back later or something, or invest that as invest that cash, like, in some kind of any other asset or so. So those are the 9 reasons, and right now I'm gonna play this video, and after that the video from the business, and then I will play this video from Economy Times. Okay, so please have a listen.
Our interview with AMP Chair David Murray coming up. But first tonight, the fallout from the Royal Commission continues to hurt the big banks. ANZ has taken a $400 million hit to its profit due to mounting legal bills and repayments to customers. CEO Shane Elliott says banks are facing pressures on profit like never before. It comes as the Commonwealth Bank announced it's getting out of wealth management. Here's Andrew Robertson.
Who'd like to commence the bidding this afternoon? Homes here to be bought.
But buyers are in short supply. House prices are falling, fewer loans are being written, and the days of stellar bank profit growth are over.
Borrowing capacity is reduced, investor lending is stalled, and competition increased.
For ANZ, like the other banks, the Royal Commission is also taking its toll. Full-year profit of $6.4 billion was unchanged from last year, a result which would have been much better without $55 million in legal costs from the Commission and another $377 million to repay customers for the bad behaviour exposed.
The Royal Commission takes all the growth away from ANZ, at least in the short term.
The Royal Commission has prompted 3 of the Big 4 banks to sell large parts of their wealth management divisions, which includes financial planning, the source of many scandals. Commonwealth is going a step further, also disposing of its funds management unit to a Japanese buyer for $4 billion.
If you're a bank, it's clear now you should be focusing on banking, and that's what they are going to do. That's what ANZ is doing as well.
AMP is simplifying its business as well, selling its life insurance division last week for $3 billion, a deal which contributed to its shares crashing 25% in one day. A group of big investors says it's a huge destruction of value, and they're threatening to have the board thrown out, a board already gutted by the Royal Commission.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that, and let me play this video. And yeah, this guy has been talking about the Australian housing market for a long time. So if you want, you can subscribe to his channel, and that's the name. If you want, I'll share the link on this video. So please have a listen.
There's no polite way of putting this, but I would be shitting myself if I was a property investor. And by property investor, I mean someone who owns more than one property. The more properties, the worse it would get. If you got the portfolio of properties and you think you're so smart, you made so much money on paper in the last 10-20 years, think again. Please watch this to the end. There's so much good content.
There are more signs the great property market slowdown is starting to bite. Building supplies company CSR has shut down one of its bricks kilns in Sydney and cut back shifts at its Western Australian plasterboard facility, as its share price has tumbled more than 40% since the recent peak. But CEO Rob Sindel says the property market is in an orderly correction, not a crash. I spoke with Rob Sindel earlier.
I mean, I've stopped videos in the past when people whose vested interest is for property to continue to go up. I mean, they sell bricks. They've just closed the brick factory and they've reduced shifts in another one. The share price dropped 40%. You know what that means? People are shorting because it's very hard to actually short, meaning make money on a dropping market. It's very hard to do it. In Australia, there's no CDOs or financial instruments where you can buy into to cash in on a dropping market. Instead, you can what's called short banks or brick companies, other building suppliers, and this is exactly what's happening. So the share price dropped 40%. What do you think that means?
Rob Sindel, thank you for joining the business.
Pleasure, Kerry.
CSR shares are down another 8% today, down 40% since their recent high. Is this investors betting that the housing downturn has begun?
I think that's obviously the reason that people are worried that how far does it fall, how far does it roll over. We're still seeing good activity, as you saw from our results today.
He's seeing good activity. How is he seeing good activity when the share price is down 40%? All right, that's the market betting. Share price does not necessarily have to follow the valuation of the company or how well the company is doing, but they closed the factory and they cut down the shifts of the factory, and obviously the CEO has to spin it positively. I mean, you've got to see through this if you're a 6-year-old.
But it obviously has come off its peak. Where is the pain most acutely felt?
So I think in terms of the overall market, it's multi-residential, so it's down about 25%, and that's high-rise apartment construction in Sydney is down about 25%. But we're not feeling undue pain because that's about 12% of our revenue. Our real sweet spot is the detached market, and even that's some of the concerns that there's some softening in the detached market in New South Wales, but the rest of Australia looks reasonably good.
There's some pretty bearish predictions, particularly around house prices. Shane Oliver from AMP predicting there'll be a 20% fall from peak to trough. That obviously feeds into how many more houses people want to build. What is your prediction about how deep this is going to get?
Well, I've seen some of those predictions, and I think it doesn't change the number of houses we need, because with population growth...
Oh, and I've stopped videos before when people drop a population growth bomb. And one of the viewers made a comment and said, where are all these people going to live? And my comeback to that is they're going to live in the same house, same apartment that they lived before, except that now they're not going to pay $1 million for it. They'll pay $600,000 for it. Simple. They'll still be there. They just won't be valued that much because people just can't borrow as much as they used to.
380,000. You've got 150,000 houses required to meet that, and you've got about another 45,000 of knockdown rebuild. The demand doesn't change so long as that population growth. What changes is confidence, where it says actually, and that 20% drop, a lot of that's in the established market. In the new build market, it's saying, well, actually, do I build a house and buy a piece of land today, or will it be cheaper in 6 months' time?
And he's hitting all the good points, but then he spins it into something better. Well, the good point is that when the velocity of money slows, when money changing hands, when the deflation happens in all the markets, they happen when people lose confidence. When people think that they can get something cheaper tomorrow, if they just wait, they're going to hold on to the money. This is when the deflation happens. This is when not expansion, but deflation happens in any market. The confidence is lost. So clearly people are thinking, and everybody I've spoken to, everyone's thinking, whether you think it's going to be 5, 10%, 4% or 40% drop, you know, in your own mind, your confidence tells you that you're going to be able to buy that property that you're looking for cheaper. So you're going to buy it today, or you're just going to sit on it and wait it out? I think the latter.
I think that's more a confidence issue than a supply and demand issue.
It might not change that demand in that people might still need a place to live, but it does seem that a lot of the price action was led by speculation, that people were betting that there was going to be bigger and bigger house price rises. Now that has turned, are you predicting we're going to see a huge slowdown in construction?
No, I don't think there is in detached market. I think you've also got the investors at play here. You've also got what is the Labor Party policy around negative gearing. So investors are stepping back. That in a funny.
So he doesn't think. I'm going to stop making comments in this interview and move on to the next one. But he doesn't think it's going to make any effect. But people will stop buying because of the Labor policy, and it's not going to be as attractive. And not to mention, even if they want to buy, they can't get the money from the bank. I mean, he kind of says, yeah, I agree with you, but no. Then he contradicts himself. But hey, he's the CEO of a brick-making company, so of course you're going to be saying that.
The battleground over negative gearing and capital gains, sorting fact from fiction for investors. And the canary in the construction coal mine, building supplier CSR, on how hard the housing slowdown will hit. With the federal government's future looking shaky, investors are focusing on Labor's promises to wind back negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions. Property lobby groups are warning of a $12 billion fall in the market if the policies go ahead. But tax experts say the current concessions are too generous, and it's a good time to introduce the changes. Here's finance correspondent Philip Lasker.
There aren't too many things more important to vet Lauren Bajaya than animal welfare.
Wonderful. He looks pretty healthy. How old is he now?
But securing her future is also vital, and she sees Labor's plans to reduce tax concessions for property investors as a threat.
They may reduce my actual ability to purchase property and to hold it for the long term, and it also may reduce the actual growth in my properties and my ability to fund myself in retirement.
The government's approach from the former Property Council employee and now leader has been harder hitting.
That would be taking a sledgehammer to the property market, and you wouldn't have a safe landing, which is what we're moving towards. You'd have a crash landing, or you'd have a hard landing.
So you'll have a crash landing if Labor comes in power, and it's looking like all the polls are saying it will. So, although it's a Prime Minister, he's a politician, so you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt.
2 years ago, as big city property prices boomed, Labor announced plans to cut back on negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions.
Removing a tax break for investors helps make it more affordable for owner-occupiers and first home buyers. Secondly, it helps with financial stability.
Labor will cut the capital gains tax discount from 50 to 25% and scrap negative gearing for established properties, but the changes will be grandfathered, and investors will still be able to negatively gear new properties.
And you know what's going to happen with those new properties? You'll have to go buy in the sticks, and nobody is going to want to live there or won't be able to afford it again. And people who do end up living in those new areas, greenfield areas, will still continue to live there, except that they're not going to be paying all these ridiculous prices. Again, that's my prediction. Not a financial advice, just my opinion and prediction, and I'm standing by at peak to trough, 40%. Continue on watching, please.
Master Builders Australia argues that the tax changes make property investment far less attractive, despite the exemption for new dwellings, a dangerous policy in a falling market. But Labor is not for turning. The Tax Institute welcomes plans to cut what it sees as an overly generous capital gains tax discount, which is simple to implement. On the other hand, the negative gearing changes are more problematic.
Want to hear crickets?
Who'd like to commence the bidding this afternoon? Homes here to be bought.
But buyers are in short supply. House prices are falling, fewer loans are being written, and the days of stellar bank profit growth are over.
Borrowing capacity is reduced, investor lending is stalled, and competition increased.
Oh, by the way, that dire prediction, 3-point prediction, comes from none other than Shane Elliott, who is ANZ Bank's CEO. And the last piece of the puzzle for tonight, for you.
National property values have continued to slide, down 3.5% in the last year, the biggest pullback since 2012. Sydney was down 7.5% ahead of Melbourne, which lost 4.5% in the last year. Perth and Darwin are down about 3%. Most other capitals recorded slight increases.
Clearly, people's borrowing capacities have been trimmed, and that's forcing values lower. And doesn't look like anywhere in the near future that those trends are going to reverse.
Hobart was the strongest performer, up 15% in the past 12 months.
Okay, so that's it. So before I finish this video, I just want to mention something. I mean, despite everything what we've seen so far, right, it's really hard to believe there are still people you walk up to them and you talk to them about the housing market, they still say, oh, it's just not gonna last for long, maybe in few months time it will start going back up, which is hard to believe, right? I've heard experts talking about housing market, and they reckon this time when the housing market goes down by say 40%, they're predicting it might go down by 40%. It might not recover back up to like where it was in early 2017, mid 2017 for another 10 years or so. And if, for example, Labour governments are gonna come in if the Labour gonna win in the next election, right, and if they're gonna scrap or just reduce like all the tax benefits for negative gearing, for someone who bought a property in 2017, someone who paid like $1 million for a property in 2017, for him to see that house going back up to 1 million, he probably had to wait for another 10 years or so. Like we had like 20 years of 26 or 7 years of growth, like a boom in the housing market. But these booms not gonna last forever, right? There will be a day like the trend gonna turn around and it's gonna go back down. So if anyone's like waiting to buy, what I would do, this is not financial advice, this is what I would do. I would rather wait for another, at least for another 12 months or 12 to 18 months to get a bargain, because next in 2019 we'll see a lot of people like might not be, even investors, even owner occupiers, they might not be able to service their mortgage because of the reasons that we talked about early in the video. So if that's the case, more people will be selling and they are still building apartments, and this gonna make it's gonna increase the supply like a lot. If that's the case, so increased supply and at the same time less buyers because of tighter lending, less borrowing capacity, meaning less demand with higher supply, meaning housing market has to correct, in this case, given that we had 27 years growth, this time has to correct like massively, like so 40 to 50% is a must. It's very likely that it could happen before it start going back up. Yeah, so I didn't think this video is gonna be 30 minutes long, but thanks for your time. So I'll probably speak to you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.